So today we will have a look at synthesizing dub techno chords that will sound like this. Now I will try to make this video as beginner friendly as possible, which means that I will not use too many modules. Most of the modules I will use will be from the so-called fundamental collection from VCA, and I will try to explain more what I'm doing and why. One more thing before we start, this video will concentrate mostly on the synthesis part, on synthesizing those dub chords and not about sequencing them. There are many ways you can sequence chords in VCA. I will put a link to a video in the description about a few ways you can sequence chords and create chord progressions in VCA. Of course, if you are using the VST version of VCA, you can also do this from the DAW. In our case, in this video, I'm going to use the Notesec 16 from JW, which is probably the easiest way you can create chords in VCA. I have it set to 4 notes of polyphony channels set to 4 in the right-click menu, which means that we will have chords with up to 4 notes in them. Of course, you can use other settings if you want. So let's start with the actual sound. We will use 2 oscillators. Again, I will use the oscillators from VCA, the so-called fundamental collection. Right, so we have 2 oscillators, they will generate the sound, and I will want a way to mix them. There are many mixers we can use in VCA. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to use the mix module from VCA that will mix signals at unity gain, so without any attenuation, right? I don't have any way to lower the mix of one of the voices. Just because it's simple, you can of course experiment with other mixers. So we have 2 oscillators. I'm going to use 2 square waves or pulse waves, right? Audio in our case will be red, so red cables. Right, so now we have the mixed, and I want one oscillator to be an octave down from the other oscillator. Now there are a few ways we can do this. If we have a look here, we can see the frequency is about 261 Hertz, which means that if I want an octave down, basically we need the half of it, right? If you divide the frequency of an oscillator by 2, you get an octave down. If you multiply it by 2, you get an octave up. We want an octave down. So there are a few ways I can do this. I can either go now to around 130 Hertz, right, manually, or if I right-click the frequency knob, and you can see we have here 261.63, and I divide this by 2, right, backslash by 2 or slash by 2, and enter, you see it will basically divide the frequency by 2. Or if I want, I can also enter specific notes. Right, so for example, I know that this oscillator by default is tuned to C4. So if I enter C4, right, again in this right-click menu, and I hit enter, you will see there will be no movement because it will stay on C4. I want an octave down, I want C3. So if I right-click it again and enter C3, right, it will take it also an octave down. So like this, if your oscillator is not tuned to C by default, for whatever reason, you can always right-click and enter the specific note you want. Right, so now we have 2 square waves. One is an octave down from the other, and they are mixed. Now let's use the pitch information from the sequencer. So pitch in Eurorec and in VCA most of the time is volt per octave, right? So I'm going to use a yellow cable for pitch information, and if I hit hold control, I can take another yellow cable from the destination, right? I can just grab another one. Already you can notice that the cables became thicker, and also there is a blue light, and you can see also we have 4 channels of polyphony. Again, we have, in this case, we have 3 chords with 4 notes in them. So we have basically now what happened is that we multiplied each of the modules by 4. So we have 4 oscillators here, we have 4 oscillators here, we have 4 mixers, right? And from the mixer, I would like to go to a filter. Again, I will use the filter from VCA. Of course, please experiment also with other filters and other oscillators. Right, so from the mix, this will go to the filter. Again, we have a thicker cable, which means it's polyphonic. So now basically we have also 4 filters. Now I'm going to use a low-pass filter, and this low-pass filter will go to a VCA. A VCA basically is a module in modular, in Eurorack, in VCV rack that we can use to control amplitude of signals, to control the amplitude of a signal. Basically, in our case, because it's audio, we're basically speaking about volume, right? So I'm going to send the low-pass filter output to the VCA. The low-pass filter will let the low frequencies pass, basically attenuating, reducing the level, reducing the volume of the higher frequencies, which are higher from this point, which is called the cutoff point. Right, so this is going to a VCA. Now we can control the levels of those oscillators, right? And we will use two modules or one module, but two instances of it that it will help us control the cutoff of the filter and the volume. So this module will be the ADSR module. This is an envelope generator. It will generate an envelope that we can then control or use to control different aspects of our patch. In our case, again, one envelope will control the filter. It will go to the cutoff CV input of the filter. So it will basically move this control for us. We don't have to use our mouse. It will do it for us. And the other envelope will control the level. Modulation, by the way, is green in my case. This is the color coding I'm using, so I'm going to use green cables, right, for the VCA and for the cutoff of the filter. Now we will need something to control or to tell those envelopes when to work, and this will be the gate output from the sequencer. Again, pay attention that it's polyphonic. Right, so now we have also 4 envelopes for the filter, 4 VCAs and 4 envelopes for the VCA or for the VCAs, right? So everything here is polyphonic. And now I'm going to send the VCA to the output. In this case, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to use another module just so we don't have to go to the mixer all the time, right? But of course, you can send this directly to the mixer. So now we have this, and when I start changing the envelopes, we will start getting sound. So first of all, let's start with the envelope for the actual volume of this voice, right? So this will be the decay and the release in this case, right? And those are basically the chords. Again, I can change the cutoff. But I don't want to change the cutoff with the mouse, and I want to add more punchiness, more crunchiness, basically to make this sound a bit more snappy, right? So to do this, I can use the envelope for the filter. So first of all, I'm going to open the modulation amount. So this will control basically how much the envelope will control the filter. So let's do something like this. And now I can start changing the envelope of the filter, right? Again, decay and release in this case. Already, it's much, much snappier. I can also add some resonance. Which will basically add even more emphasis on this movement. Right? So now we have the basic sound. Of course, again, experiment with other filters, experiment with the envelopes, change the envelope times, right? And also experiment with different oscillators, different mixers, and so on. But let's continue. And actually, before we continue with this sound, I want to turn this polyphonic voice into a monophonic voice. Why? Because first of all, I want to save CPU. Again, as I mentioned, now we have 4 first oscillators, 4 second oscillators, 4 mixers, 4 VCAs, 4 envelopes twice, so 8 envelopes and 4 VCAs. This will increase the CPU usage, and I want, from this point on, I want to go monophonic. Polyphony is now not so important for me. And also because some modules might react differently to polyphony. and I don't want to deal with this. So something I can do is I can use the sum module from VCV, again, also from the fundamental collection. This will basically take a polyphonic voice, in this case, a 4-voice polyphonic audio voice or signal or whatever, and will sum it into a monophonic signal, right? So if I send the VCA to the sum module, you can see we have 4 channels. And from here on, you see it says mono. From here on, we will get only 1 channel. So if I send this to the output, you can see the cables are thinner. And we have basically a monophonic voice, but that has 4-note chords, right? Okay, so now how we continue? Now we continue with effects, right? We want to make this sound a bit more alive. By the way, this patch will be available as a selection that you can then load in any of your other patches. So if you want a sort of a preset of those dub chords, you can just load it through the file menu and import selection, right? So then you can just load it into your already existing patch. Anyway, so now let's continue with effects, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to use first of all a reverb. So I'm using the reverb from Valley, and I'm going to send, right, the monophonic voice to the left input. Let me zoom in a bit. Right, to the left input. If you connect something just to the left input, in this case, it will be internally connected to the right input, so you don't have to connect it to both inputs. And now the left and right will go to the output. So from here on, it will be a stereo signal. I have here the lows, the input lows a bit down, right, on the filters of the reverb, right, so we don't let the low frequencies pass, sorry. Right, and let's start taking the wet up, a bit more decay. Oh yeah. Right? Already we have something nicer. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a delay after the reverb. Usually you will send the delay, you will use a delay before the reverb, you will send a delay through the reverb. In this case, for this sort of sound design idea, I'm going to send the reverb to the delay. So the delay will also process the reverbed sound, which can be quite interesting. Right, so I'm going to send this into a delay. The delay I choose to use will be the Chronoblob 2 from Aura Devices. Again, all of the modules are available for free, so all of you can use this idea, this sound design patch. And I really like the Chronoblob. If you watch my videos, you know this. So from the reverb, it will go to the delay, right, left, and right. I'm not going to sync the delay with the clock in this case. It can be a nice, it can add nice movement, right, if it's not synced. And from here, it will go to the output. So we'll do a few things. First of all, I'm going to change this to a ping pong delay by clicking this button here. You can see now delay mode dual. If I click it once, it will be delay mode ping pong. This is this mode here. Right, I'm going to change the times for the left and right channel, and also the global time. Oh yeah, a bit more feedback. Right. And again, it's not synced to the clock, so there is some movement there. Right, so now it's time to add some movement to everything. Right, so what we will do, first of all, I want to add movement a bit to the overall sound of this, of the oscillators. Right, I want to have some movement in the frequency So I'm going to use a band pass filter. I'm going to select all of the modules and just move them. Right, so I'm going to use tangent or tangents from a Volt, which is probably my favorite filter in VCVREC. And after the sum module, right, I'm going to use it, I'm going to send it to tangents, and I'm going to use the bandpass filter or the bandpass input, right? Basically, it will be a sort of like a bell-shaped filter that I'm going to move left and right. So this is going now to the reverb. Let's add some resonance. And again, because this is going after the mono output, after the sum module, this will be only one filter and not four, only one reverb and not four, and only one delay and not four. No need for polyphony in this case here. And you know what, let's take the reverb and the delay down. And here I'm going to add an LFO, basically another oscillator, but in such low frequencies that it will basically slowly move the cutoff of this bandpass filter. Right, so I'm going to send it to the CV input, and now I have to open the attenuverter in this case. Maybe change the starting point a bit, make the frequency of the LFO a bit slower even. Right, so now there is also movement there. Let's add even more movement with the delay and the tuning of the oscillators. So basically what we will do with the delay, this Chronoblock 2 delay has also a tape delay mode. So here you can see time modulation mode. It says now crossfading when it's to the right, when it's to the left, which is supposed to be by default on. It says resampling, basically is a sort of a tape delay effect that when you move the delay time, when you change the delay time, also the pitch will change. Right, and we can create a really interesting effect like this by slowly and just slightly modulating the delay times. So I'm going to use another LFO, again the one from VCV. This will go to the left CV input and to the right CV input. And now here in this case, we have attenuverters. Attenuverters basically mean in the 12 o'clock it's 0, so no modulation. To the right it will add modulation in one direction. To the left it will add the inverted modulation, right, in the other direction. So just slightly to add some pitch movement here with the delay. Right, and another thing I want to do is add movement to the tuning of the oscillators and to the pulse width of the pulse wave, right? We're using pulse waves, square waves that we can change their pulse width. So for this I'm going to use a random signal. This is the random module also from the fundamental collection of VCVREC. I want to show you this on the scope. Right, if I'm using the smooth output, you can see that we get basically a random signal. And if I change the shape, if I take the shape all the way up, it will change into a smooth random signal. And I can change the rate, I can make it quite slow, right? So it will move nice and slow. And this we will use to modulate the frequency, the tuning of the oscillators through the FM input. FM stands for frequency modulation. Frequency is pitch, right? Just like we saw before, the frequency of this oscillator was 261, more or less, which was C4. The frequency of the other oscillator is 130.81, which is C3. So frequency is pitch. If we are modulating the frequency of an oscillator, we basically modulate its pitch. So again, only slightly, really slightly, just a bit. If I hold control on my keyboard, I can change parameters more finely, like fine-tune them. Right, and we can use the same modulation also for the pulse width through the pulse PWM, pulse width modulation CV input. Here we can open the attenuverters a bit more. And again, you can see I open one to the left and I open one to the right. So they are inverted. When one modulation moves in one direction, the other one, even though I'm using the same source, it will move in a different direction. Basically, adding some variation to the modulation. Right, so we have this sound basically. Of course, there's a lot we can fine-tune, the delay times, we can add more modulation to different aspects, like modulation to the modulation amount of the filter. We can also, let's do this. Let's use the random signal also to modulate the envelopes, right? So I can take the smooth output to the decay and release of the envelopes, right? And just open them slightly, right? So there is also movement to the envelopes, to the length of the envelopes. Right, so there's a lot you can do this. You can use other waveforms than the pulse waves or square waves. You can mix even more oscillators. You can mix in some noise. You can use wavetable oscillators, different filters, different envelope times, different modulation sources. Right, this is more or less a basic setup, which sounds quite nicely. But this is more or less it. Let's listen to it now in context. Right, so if I unmute the other voices I have here, basically a simple bass drum, a simple hi-hat, and a simple bass, nothing too amazing, just to listen to those chords in context. Again, links in the description to the video about chord progressions, and to this selection you can load in your patches. Oh baby. That's it. Thank you for watching. Cheers.